to the second annual Famous Scholars in Expat Management Symposium. I'm Yvonne McNulty, and with Jan Selmer, my co-organiser and chair of the expatriate management track here at EURAM, we are organising this symposium for the second year. From the end, over here to my left, we have Michael Dickmann, who's come from the UK. Next to him we have Vesa Suutari, who's come from Finland. We have Mina Westman, who's come from Israel. We have Margaret Shaffer over here, who's come from Oklahoma.
In the US, in case you don't know.
And then we have Jan Selmer, who has come from Sweden. Okay, so welcome to the panel. Right, so let's not be so formal and let's just relax a bit. And let's start off with the first question. So the first question is target journals. When you're selecting a target journal, is it potluck or planned? And remember, we want an honest answer. Anybody have any thoughts on that they want to share? Potluck or planned?
Planned.
Planned?
Yes.
Is it always planned?
Mostly, yes.
Okay, how do you do
Almost
that?
always planned. Is this on?
Yeah.
I generally always plan what journal I want to target, because I find that helps me to craft the manuscript. Because some journals are going to be more practitioner-oriented, some are going to be more theoretically oriented, so it really does inform my research and how I go about shaping that manuscript.
Do you always manage to publish it in the journal that you plan to publish it in?
Oh, no.
Always?
Yeah.
No,
I wish.
What happens? What happens when it doesn't work out?
My vision isn't always consistent with the editor's or the reviewer's vision, so I've had manuscripts that are desk rejected because they don't fit a journal, and so that probably goes back to me. I should have paid more attention to what they were looking for, and done a little more research on that before I decided. Generally it's because it's not a good fit, I think, for a desk rejection. Other times it's just not, it doesn't meet the requirements or the delight of the review team, so you can't make everyone happy.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Jan?
Yeah, I must admit I also plan, but I plan in another way. I think about level of journal. Oh, I want to have this level of journal. I aim at that. So I don't custom make for a specific journal, which means that I think Margaret, you have a lot of work to do if you want to get to another one. You have to rewrite it, the whole thing, especially if it's very different from what your first target was. So I don't need to do that because I have a level. And of course, there are always some tricks of the trade to make it relevant to the journal to publish my manuscript. I have to make it look relevant. I have to cite some previous articles in that journal to make it appear that this is a relevant manuscript. So you should at least have a look at it.
Okay. So when you say level, you mean rank? You mean you're looking
Yeah, there's so many ranks out there, so it's hard. But generally, you know, if you generally in your mind you have 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So let's say you have an idea. This manuscript, this is impossible to get even to 2. So okay, let's go for 3.
Okay.
Or you have something. This is really, really good. Yeah, let's go for 1.
Okay.
And if you get rejected in 1, yeah, okay, let's try another one and see if it's a sort of just accident along the road, or if it's really something in the manuscript that makes it inadequate for the 1 level.
Okay, understood. What about over here?
Well, I think it's planned, but I mean, you said you're not going to talk about how to do good research, but I think we have to say one sentence at least. That, you have to plan the research before, that's the way I do, before you decide where you're going to submit it. So it has to be a good research, theory-based, good methodology. I'm not going to repeat all the things. And one thing that I found very, very helpful to all my career is sticking to the APA manual. For me, it's like a Bible because they've got such good advice. They just have to go back and forth to it. That's the way I feel. And my advisor was Dov Even, if you know him. He told me from the beginning, aim high. So that's what I try to do. And of course, not everything succeeds, but I aim high.
What do you do then? It doesn't succeed in aiming high, and your next step is what?
So, first of all, when you speak about, like every university, first of all, we have to be practical. We want to please or to act according to the policy of the university. So each university, each department has the top, the A level, which is not always the same. So I'll try if it doesn't go to the first one, maybe I'll try another one, which is A level. But if not, I'll go to second level. Sometimes, if it doesn't go for second level, I mean, in recent years, I won't publish it. I mean, I won't go to third level.
Okay, so what do you do with it? It just sits there, and you just... And you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was rejected from 2 or 3 journals, so it means, because it's also a story I want to tell, and that's the thing that I think are important. And if so many reviewers think it's not important, so it will be in the shell, and nothing will happen.
Okay. Do you get them out at a later point and do something with them?
Not yet.
Okay. But it's really fascinating. No, it's really fascinating just to hear about like how you handle that and what you do, because I think there's this expectation that you just got to keep going and going and going. I think that's your approach, Jan. Jan, very much. Jan and I wrote a chapter on this about getting published, and you're going to publish it somewhere, somehow.
That's my principle over the years. I publish everything. At least that's my principle. And I'm pretty good at keeping that. Maybe over my long career, maybe I can count the manuscripts on one hand that I have not published. Because my idea is that if I think myself it's something worth reading, who will read it but me if I just keep it with me? Nobody. So better publish in a 3rd or 4th level journal than not publishing at all.
Okay.
That's how I think.
Okay.
So that's been my leading principle over the years.
Okay. Okay. Michael, Vesa.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear because everyone has a slightly different view.
They do, yeah.
Because I think that my view has always been pretty relaxed on these publication forums. I don't really select so carefully, so I think I'm much more looking on something that interests me and sort of looking at the forums where I see this kind of stuff has been published and what sort of the audience is kind of right kind of audience.
Right.
And typically I'm much more looking for the story when writing it.
Right.
Then I see where it flows. I can see, of course, like as an outcome, you can see that okay, I managed to do this time, and maybe this one this time. So then you sort of maybe target it slightly differently. But
Okay. When do you make the decision about where you're going to publish? At what point in the
I
writing
think
of
it's
the manuscript?
pretty much in the late stage because I have to see like how far I get because it develops. In particular in qualitative research, like I've been doing quite much, so you don't really have a clear estimate where this ends. Like if you have a quantitative one, you know that you have your hypothesis, and if they get support, then it's like different story.
Which is
Yeah.
what you do, Margaret, because Margaret does a lot of quantitative research, so 2 different approaches to it. I like what you're saying there because I do qualitative research as well, and so it is about what you end up with at the end of the writing process. Okay, Michael.
You asked potluck or planned?
Yeah.
Of course, potluck. No, I just wanted to put that into the field because I guess nobody really goes for potluck, right? So yes, it's planned. It's planned in a sense of a mixture of what I hear. So yes, I wait a bit like Vesa to see what comes out and what sort of quality it is. Right? I choose journals in terms of the discourse they have, so I can contribute to the discussion. I think if I look back, I started off being careful in the sense of actually going lower than possibly I could have gone. Okay, it took me a long time to get the guts to say, okay, I'll go for a high-level journal, the highest level journal. Occasionally, I go for the highest level journal to get feedback. Because I think I'll be rejected, but I'll get further than the desk, and so I'll get real good input to refine it and then move to the next journal. On the other hand, a bit like Jan, I think some of the rules of the game are there because they have a deeper meaning. So that thing about, yes, go and look at who's published what sort of article in that journal, important, but I think you need to really connect to it, to some of that discussion. Otherwise, people feel it. Okay, if you just cite and it's just in the introduction, the first 2 pages, you somehow got those 2 or 3 citations in, right? I think it's ideal to go beyond that because then you actually have a meaningful contribution there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for that. I want to open it up to the audience. Do we have any questions you want to ask? Yehuda? Yes.
I would like to recommend a book called How to Publish in Top Management Journals. Timothy Clark did this book, and there is a chapter about how to target the journal in general in business management. I did it. But.
Thank you. Do we have? Yes.
So when you were talking about planning, and you said very clearly it's planned, very firmly, at what stage is it planned? Do you mean right from the start when you're planning the research design and asking the question, or do you mean when you start writing the manuscript, when you've got the results?
Actually, it starts at the design stage because I know that I want to, first of all, target top-level journals. So in order to do that, then that's going to indicate how I should design my study. Okay? It doesn't always end up in top-level journals, but at least I want to target those at the beginning. And in fact, I wanted to build on a comment that Mina had about if it doesn't get in at the first couple of top-level journals, then she knocks it down to the second level. Some of you may have read my paper on spouse adjustment. And that one was rejected from 3 top-level journals before I finally got it into a 4th top-level journal. So don't necessarily give up. And one of the main reasons that one was rejected is because I got the feedback that it wasn't relevant to management scholars because it was about spouse adjustment and not expatriates themselves. So, persistence, I think, is another key element that you have to have.
How long did that take?
Years.
So be specific. We're looking for honesty here. So how long did that take?
That came out of my dissertation research, which was in 94, right? When was that published? 2001. 2001. So 7 years. I know. And a lot of tears.
I congratulate you. Resilience.
Gold star.
Yeah. Okay, another question up the back here. Yes.
Okay, in light of the fact that, well, it takes 7 years to get something published and, sometimes things don't end up where we want, how do you manage the pipeline? How do you manage multiple projects to make sure that something is coming out at a given point in time?
I always have a pipeline. In fact, I have a note on that to talk about that maybe later. But to answer your question, I think it is important to have things at different stages. So I'm at a beginning stage on some projects, and I also have things under review and things in the middle as well. It means that you have to be able to multitask and have several different projects going at once. I know I've worked with some doctoral students that struggle with that because they want to try and finish one complete thing before they go on to the next. And I think that's a dangerous strategy because it is such a long process. So if you can have a pipeline, I think it'll be more beneficial.
Yes, Bernd.
I probably am not telling many people something new, but maybe for the PhD students. And Jan, you mentioned that you're looking at levels of journals. Har Singh has done a fantastic job over many, many years now to rank academic journals. I think she's now in her 61st or 62nd edition of these rankings. So if anybody is looking for a list that Jan might be using, Anil Har Singh from Australia has done a fantastic job publishing this list over many years.
Thank you. One final question. Yes, right at the back.
Yeah, just from the observations of the panel, do you feel that the methodology in some of the journals, the orientation is more the issue? For example, in quantitative research, SEM was a bit of a trend, now it's moved to mediation and moderation. Do you feel that one has to sort of follow the trend, or is that not a prudent thing to do?
Mina, you've obviously got something to say about
No, I
this.
just actually discussed it with Margaret the other day that I had a feeling, and I actually regret it, that journals, I hope nobody is going to kill me, journals are putting more weight on the methodology than on theory. That's my feeling. I don't know. I don't have proof, and we just discussed it. But the other way, and I think also maybe one of the reasons is that especially the young PhD students or the young professors, I think they are much more knowledgeable about all the new techniques than our generation. No doubt about it. So I don't know what's the hen and what's the egg, but a lot of focus on methodology, and I think we can't fight it, we have to join it.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on to the next question? Yes, please.
I think again it's pretty dependent on the publication form. So we have journals which has the variation, but then some that have more focused. So again, maybe you have to know the journals and select the right ones in that way.
Absolutely. Look at the journals, look at your topic and how it's been treated. To some extent, it's like be in the flow, right? It's a shame. I see your point, right? You might want to address it sometimes, and of course it's a game. It depends a bit on the reviewers and so on. But you get a feel for some journals really need highly sophisticated stats, and some others do it in a different way.
It helps though, doesn't it, that they change the editor. Some journals are very strict, 3-year tenure and that's it, and then new editor-in-chief. Others have editors that stay on for 20 years. Does that help address it sometimes with this sort of trend that we see towards it? Yeah? Okay. Right, next question, let's move on. The next one is about navigating revision. Everybody loves that. So the question is love it or hate it. Now I want to preface this by saying that when I was going through my doctoral studies, all of my supervisors said to me that some of the best advice they gave me was that if you get the offer of an R&R, that is an excellent outcome. Whereas other people around me were groaning when they would get an R&R. And the advice I was given was that if you get the offer of an R&R, it's an opportunity, and it means that they see enough in your paper that they're going to give you another opportunity to improve it, and they wouldn't waste their reviewer resources on your paper if they didn't feel that it could potentially be published at the end of it. So in your experience going through revisions, when you've received your R&Rs, I want to ask you, what's your first reaction when you get it? You get it, you see decision on, and it's in your inbox.
Yeah!
Exactly.
That's my reaction.
When I first became a professor, though, and I am in the academic world, and I got an R&R, I thought, oh no, I have all this extra work to do on it. But now I get an R&R, I'm delighted, because that means that there is a chance. I will always take an R&R opportunity. I never waste one. Even if it's a high risk, R&R, go for it, because your odds of eventually getting that published are much greater.
Yeah, okay, great advice. Your experiences over here, the silent gentleman.
Yeah. I think I pretty much follow the same. I always resubmit because it's always a possibility to develop the article anyway further, even though it might lead to any unexpected decision in the end. So, and I think what is good in that stage is typically that I read the feedback, in particular if there is more of it, I take a little bit break to have a distance and then like take analytical approach one by one, that what are the easy ones, and then like tackling those ones, and then starting to see that okay, these ones are the tough ones, and continuing gradually.
Okay, Michael.
I mean, I'll share the incredible naivety I had on my first R&R, I think. I was a PhD student and I submitted to JITS. I got an R&R. You know, that is, yay! I felt deflated. And I'd done it as a single author, and I was crashing, and I needed probably 2 weeks to really look at it again after reading through the first time. Okay, but you know, I've moved on and I've realized that was incredibly naive, of course. And so today, R&R means I stay in the game, right? It means I have a chance, and yes, I will address these points. Now, the rest of the reaction is really down to, do I believe the reviewers and the editor, they're having fair points and wanting to help me? Because actually, mostly that is what's happening in reality, okay? And so sometimes I need to step back and sleep over it and so on to get to that, they want to help me. Sometimes it's, of course, a bit harder because I have the feeling, wow, they've been really nitpicking and it's not really, you know, very developmental. But again, I need to then maybe step back a couple of more steps or some more nights, but I will take that opportunity to try to address it.
Okay, so I don't think we're getting honest here. I mean, this is the only thing anybody at my university ever talks about in the coffee room, staff room, pantry, whatever, is the crushing, you know, R&R, or how am I going to tackle this, or what am I going to do, or whatever. I think there's the things our supervisors tell us. Yes, an R&R is to be celebrated, but how you actually do that when you don't agree with what the reviewer is asking you to do. So I'm with you, Margaret. Like, it's definitely do the R&R. Definitely, it's a better chance than when it was under review the first time. Like, you're edging closer to your goal, but you don't necessarily agree with what the reviewers are asking you to do, especially when they're being really generic and saying something like needs more theory, or what's your contribution, whatever. How do you approach that? What do you do? What are your insider tips for how to approach these things?
Actually, what I do when I get the letter is I just read the first paragraph, and that tells me whether they're rejecting it or it's an R&R, and then I put it aside because I don't want to read the comments yet. If it's an R&R, I go celebrate, and I'm happy because I haven't read their comments, so I can still be happy. And it takes me about a week to get back to their comments and read those, and then I'm more objective about it when I read them. So
Okay.
I usually try to enjoy the moment and relish that because I know it's not going to last forever. Because once I read their comments, I'm going to become angry or upset or disappointed or something.
And what do you do then? When you do, I think if you read any book on getting published and during revisions and getting reviewers' comments, we all have that human reaction, right? We all have that, okay, did they even read the paper? Did they even understand what I was trying to convey? Right? So I think there's a human, and the tips here are stand back, don't take it personally, calm down, never ever fire off an angry email to the editor-in-chief. You would be surprised. No. You would be shocked if you knew how many people do that.
Actually, if you go back a little bit, when you submit a manuscript, the response from the journal can be two things: reject or revision. That's nothing else. So which one do you prefer?
Actually, the first manuscript that I ever submitted, it was as a PhD student, and it was with my PhD supervisor. We submitted it to JAP and got a conditional acceptance on it. Straight out. And I'm thinking, oh, this is easy. There's no,
That explains your subsequent reaction when you iron out. Right, okay, understood.
But the truth of the matter is, Michael and I are editor-in-chief of journals, so we can see this from both sides. We are both publishing authors, and we are also making these decisions at the same time. Not on our own papers, unfortunately.
I think fortunately, actually.
So, but we know, if we give a revision, that means we are interested in publishing this manuscript if this and this and this and this and this. So it's definitely a foot in the door. Whether you get into the door or not, it's not only your own making. It's others also that have to be convinced here to open the door for you. But at least a foot in the door. It means it's a positive feedback. Don't treat it as anything else. You can call it very risky or highly risky, whatever, but it's still positive because it means there is a chance, because we are interested actually to publish this if and if and if and if and if.
So if you don't agree with if and if and if and if and if, but you still want to get it published, I think that's the barrier for a lot of people. I know colleagues who disagree, they get that, right? But they disagree and it sits there and they just don't do what's being asked to publish in that one because they're holding on so tight to, but I want it to be my way. I want it to be, you're not understand. Do you get what I mean? I'm not saying that, I can't say that all my colleagues are like that, but I know a couple that are like that. What's your, and there's probably some in the room perhaps, how do you let go of that? How do you understand that it's a dance almost that you're doing between you and the editor in trying to come to a compromise about how much you change, how much you let go, how much you hold on? How do you do that?
Well, I think most of us, or maybe everybody, we don't like to read the comments. I mean, we agree with some of them, but the first reaction, as Margaret said, I sometimes, when I get an R&R, I think it might be easier to start a new paper than starting pleasing all the reviewers, because most of you probably know that one reviewer asks for one thing and other reviewers sometimes ask for a different thing. And then you don't know what will be the result when you answer each of them. But I think first of all, that's what I was taught. You don't argue with reviewers. You can't. You may say, and I mean I've been also an associate editor, you can say, explain why you think that what you do is right. But always in a polite way, never and not arguing, but just showing the points. And I think one thing that, I don't know if you're all familiar with this, the editor, I mean, I don't think it happens very often, but sometimes the editor can get 3 bad reviews from the reviewers and still decide to accept the paper, right?
Possibility.
Yeah. So no,
It's
no.
unlikely.
Yes, no. But what I think, that's my state of mind. That even if I don't please all of them, maybe the editor will sit in the way that I wrote it. So if I want to argue, first of all, I try to see the point, because most reviewers, I think, are good people and they want to help. I had really, I think, amazing experience. I have a paper on crossover in 1995 in Journal of Organizational Behavior. And I used moderated regressions because at that time I didn't know anything better. And the associate editor was Jeff Edwards. And he said, okay, you tackled the problem methodologically, it's okay. But if you used SEM, it would be much better. And I wrote back and said, I don't know what SEM is. It was like in 1992, something like this. And he really guided me and my colleague Dalia Etzion how to do it. I mean, and we used it, and I think this is my paper that has got the most citations. So, and I think a lot of reviewers write very long reviews and really guide you. My example was methodological, but there are other ways they can guide you. So I believe they are not against me. I think that's very important, not to think that he is against you or she is against you. And then to see maybe he's right. And if he's not right, and if I think that it's absolutely wrong from my point of view, I'll try to explain why I can't do it. Or sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes there are also ridiculous reviewers. In this paper of the Kosovo, I had 98 couples. 98. 80. Yes, 98. And one of the reviewers said that in order to conduct a LISRL or EQS, you need at least 100. I had 98. And you're smiling, you're 3 reviewers, and I think, I don't know even today who was the reviewer, but I had a feeling that the reviewer is somebody important because the editor, I felt that he's okay with the sample, but he probably didn't want to go against him. And this is a very interesting story, and the paper was rejected after 3 revisions. And then I met somebody who was at the editorial board in another conference, and he said, oh, your paper was so good. And I said, yes, but it was rejected. He said, how comes? And this person that I knew, like only from conferences, not a qualified, he approached the editor and he told him, you can't reject such a paper. And the paper was accepted. And it was really one of my hits. So there are different stories, but what I can say, don't argue, but you can put your point and say, explain why you can't do it. And always, you don't have to think that if the reviewer won't like it, the editor won't like it. And I think this is very important to have in mind.
That's an incredible story. That's what we're here for, honest accounts. That's the value of conferences as well.
Yeah.
Conference talks at the end, et cetera. Do we have anything to add?
Yeah, in one sense, to 2 levels actually. Jan's point about R&R, you have a foot in the door. Okay. After that door, there's a walkway. Really, it's a journey, and it feels to me it's a journey where also we learn about the authors, not just about the ideas of the authors. Meaning that sometimes the goalpost is shifting slightly. In the sense of, on the first decision, many of my reviewers say, I see some hope in various degrees, whatever. Some are really, enthusiastic about it. Sometimes they see some hope, and if in doubt, on the first round, it is for the author. Actually, mostly. If there's hope to recover, the first round is for the author. In the second round, the goalpost shifts a bit. We want to see progress. And if that doubt persists, then it becomes a much more difficult decision. And the likelihood is higher in further stages that the decision goes against the author. Because the journey traveled might have been not enough. That's one. And then I wanted to link to this thing about what is meant, or 2 reviewers say different things. Yeah. So clarification is absolutely fine with the editor or the action editor or whoever is in charge of handling the paper. Sometimes own experience is, okay, maybe I should start when I submit, and so I get the first round and there are revisions. My process is not just sleeping over it. So I do read through the whole, not just but this is a really inciting thing. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should celebrate first and then read through it, taking some joy out of my life, I guess. And one of the ways to get that, for me, that stepping back is to, when I read after a day, after a week, occasionally, it sort of depends also how busy I am, I look at the review and I take some of the emotions out by noting down the main points and what these people want from me or my co-author team to move forward to. Through that process, I get more about it. I actually fear less about this revision. Okay, it becomes more handleable, so it looks smaller. But sometimes I have this: what do they want from me? Stuff. Okay, what do they really mean?
What do you do then?
Well, sometimes I confer with my co-authors or whatever, and we find the way. But occasionally we do write in for clarification, and 90% of the clarification means 100% it means we understand it better. 90% means it's actually not quite as important and big as I thought it was.
Right.
Okay, which is a quite nice process.
Not as serious and not requiring that mammoth rethink of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
You
It's
initially
not
thought.
fundamentally challenged. And the same process more or less is when two reviewers say different things. Okay, because then the editor clarifies something, which is really, really helpful.
A good associate editor or editor, though, is going to clarify when they're sending the decision letter, right? And say there are conflicting, and I'd like you to follow what reviewer 1 is saying as opposed to reviewer 2. Please ignore this comment by reviewer 2 as the action editor or whatever it is. I don't believe it's relevant.
Yeah, but
Vesa?
unfortunately, all reviewers and editors don't do that. So they just send, please look at the referee comments and reply to those. So I think that's probably the most difficult situation, because you can see that if I do this one, the other one wants to go this direction, the other one tries to go that direction, and then you are sort of trying to struggle it out. But at the same time, I think that it's quite rarely that there are comments that you cannot do anything. There's always, you can explain, you can frame it better, build it better, and try to develop it. And in the end, the most toughest ones that usually you put to the limitations and discuss well there. So in a sense, it's taken into account, it's there, but you don't have to always change the whole story as they suggest, because it's pretty much impossible sometimes, because also referees make sort of mistakes that they suggest something that doesn't make sense, and it's not like a thing to do, but you have to explain them, of course, then very carefully that why like this.
Okay. Before we open it up for Q&A, any last burning comments you want to make? Because I have a feeling that there may be a lot of questions.
I think it's important to keep in mind that you don't have to please every member of the review team. You just need to satisfy the majority. Because one person can still not like it and want to reject it, but if everyone else is on board with it, then they're probably going to accept it. Okay? And I think in response, given we have a couple of editors here, I'm going to say I would guess that it's not common that you call out reviewers and say, you can ignore this comment, because you don't want to alienate your reviewers either. The editors are very sensitive to that, because finding people to review these papers is hard work. And so it's a delicate dance, I think, that they do as an editor to try to balance all of that. So, but I would agree that you can explain everything and address every comment. Don't skip any of their feedback or comments. Even if you can't do what they want you to do, at least, as they have said, explain why you're not going to do it or why you can't.
Yeah, in detail.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, try to do at least part of what they want, if not everything.
Okay.
Try to do as much as you can.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And yes, occasionally, at least I occasionally do that in the sense of, reviewer 2, I don't really agree with this point stuff. But it is true. We're trying to handle the delicate balance, okay, to not alienate reviewers.
And for those who are not aware, Michael is the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Human Resource Management, and Jan is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Global Mobility, and everybody here, including myself, has been an associate editor at a journal, so we've all been in editorial roles, so we've sat on both sides of the fence. But let's hear from you. Questions about navigating reviews? Bernd?
am currently dealing with a review that drives me crazy.
It's a good start.
Yeah, right. That's why I have all this gray hair. No, but the reviewer is apparently, I'm not a native English speaker myself. And the reviewer, very obviously, at least in my opinion, has barely a grasp of the English language and is trying to lecture us on how to write this paper. And just purely on the basis of English language, I have trouble understanding what this reviewer is actually trying to get from us. And yet the editor told us very specifically in the feedback, you have to address each and every section, each and every comment from the reviewers. And I'm sitting there not knowing what to do because I don't even understand what this person is telling me. What am I supposed to do with this?
I think that's when you go back to the editor and ask for clarification.
Okay.
Specifically
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
not the whole revision, but specifically about what you don't understand, or what you, not that you don't understand, what you just need his help, his or her help, to more fully understand what it is they're asking for.
Yeah, otherwise you're just going to be spinning around trying to figure out what it is.
Yep.
And, yeah, so.
And then you run the risk of misinterpreting what they're asking for, wasting your effort, sending it back and ending up with a reject. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions that we have? Navigating reviews? Yes.
Has it ever happened to one of you getting your paper decided to pulling out your paper because the requests were considered completely, I don't know, a complete change or a very important change to your paper, or I don't know, an extreme makeover in that sense? Your paper?
Extreme makeover. Okay.
The only times I've ever considered pulling it out was when they asked me to collect more data, because I find that really annoying. But usually I go ahead and do it, and I find out and it helps. Because if you go that extra mile and do really the hard things that they want you to do, they're much more receptive. But it also means that you often have to ask for an extension on the revision as well.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Ask for an extension. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yes, Phil.
Given your status in our community, there must be situations where the person who has sent you, the associate editor or the editor who has sent you the response, must be somebody you know. So how do you use that relationship?
Ooh. Ooh. I defer to every single one of you.
As, in terms of as an author, interacting with the editor or associate editor.
Yeah, I mean, forgive me if I'm putting something bluntly out there, but with all this networking that goes on, I mean, it just must be the case that you would know, you have met previously, you have some relationship. I don't mean you go to the bar every week, I just mean you know of them, you communicate
Sure.
with their environment. So, and so far the descriptions sound like your engagement is all through written email, nothing else, despite the fact you have a relationship with these people. So I'm wondering.
What a great question.
As a reviewer, if I know the person, if I guess, sometimes I would write to the editor and say that I can't handle the paper. As an associate editor, I don't remember it ever happened to me. So,
But I know
But the-
editors, I know Jan very well, and I've submitted things to his journal. But he made it clear up front that he would have a policy that he would not be involved in the decision, and he sends it out to 3 reviewers, and whatever they decide is what happens. So, and that's a decision that the journal made to avoid some of this cronyism, I guess, that could happen. The boys club.
I try not to be involved. I tried also to make sure to be seen to be not be involved. Because I think the latter is even more important. That everybody knows I'm not involved. So, and then I don't make any comment. I get back and it's sort of 2 to 1, okay, go. 2 against 1, don't go. It happened to you, I think. It happened to others.
You have rejected my paper.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, it just how things should be, I think. And even worse, I published in my own journal. How did I do that? Did I make that decision myself? No, I didn't. I just appointed another temporary editor-in-chief for that manuscript. So one of the members of the editorial team made the final decision, and also was instructed to go the same way as I just described. Just avoid comment, just do a simple counting. Invite 3 reviews. Usually we just invite 2, but for this case, since we need to have a majority decision, just 3. So that's it. That's how I handle this. I have no idea how others handle it. How do you handle this? How do you publish in your own journal?
Yes, I have.
You don't. The principle, I never publish in my own journal, and I don't think that any editor-in-chief should publish in their own journal.
Oh,
there are many other journals, and if you really want, you can try them, or wait with the paper until you finish being the editor-in-chief. I don't think that any editor-in-chief should publish in their own journal.
Oh yeah, that's more common in the thing. And also, if you are a previous editor-in-chief, you publish in your own journal, because it's, you see, not same size, you know. So you have to be very careful in those cases.
That's why editors know you who you are.
So how do you do it?
So this could be a very long discussion. We actually do this relatively similar to what you described. Yeah, I mean, EURAM is a bit bigger in a sense of we have 3 editors-in-chiefs. So sometimes we move papers who come in from those people who we know very well to another editor-in-chief, for example. Right? So we have a choice there. In terms of when you publish in your own journal, yes, we do, occasionally at least. What happens is obviously, if it was me, I don't have anything to say to us, but our policy is we do have an understanding of who is a good reviewer over time. And our policy is to be particularly hard to the people who are on our who are associate editors or editors. They get the best reviewers we believe there are. Okay, so that's a detriment to publish with me if I want to do something in EURAM, but that's our policy.
I can attest to what Jan's procedure, because whenever it's a Jan paper, he appoints me the editor-in-chief temporarily for that paper, and it is correct. It's 3 reviews. He does not want to be involved in any way in anything. He doesn't want to know anything about the paper. He just wants to act in an author capacity. It's not sole-authored papers. These are co-authored papers with a team of authors, and they want to publish it because it's a relevant journal for them to publish in.
And even add one more thing. In the system we use, Scholar One, I can't see that paper.
That's right.
At all.
Yes.
Okay, I have nothing to do with it. Yeah. Even that.
Phil, to answer your question, even though we know each other and we get to know each other at the conferences and network with each other, you are correct about that. And so there is a question about protocols and how do we maintain that distance. The journals are all run on Scholar One and Manuscript Central, and any communication about a manuscript needs to be formal. And so there needs to be, it's tracked. There's an audit trail of everything that happens with a paper, every communication. So that's the first step you have to make, is to officially communicate whatever it is. And I don't know, I mean, I've only been in academia about 15 years. I don't know what it was like 30 years ago, whether there was the cronyism and the boys club. I don't see a lot of it today.
You know, I think I was maybe asking a different question to cronyism. I mean, I was just thinking that if you knew the name of the associate editor and you've met them before, it seems to me a rational option to ring them up instead of writing something and saying, can I put a meeting in your diary to talk through these things that I don't understand? That is just a different communication technique.
Ooh,
which it don't sound like you're doing.
No, I would not do
I've never had that.
What I have...
Why not? You could create an audit trail.
Well, what I have done before, and still do actually, is we'll sometimes intentionally ask somebody for a friendly review, because if they do a friendly review for me, they will have to not be a reviewer on that manuscript. So if I think somebody might be asked to review and they're going to be really tough, I might ask them to do a friendly review. But that's usually within a network of people that we do know also. So
that's an insider tip.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I think the only time I contacted the editor is when I needed to have a quick feedback. It was before I got my full professor, and I knew that this paper is very important for the decision, so I approached her, but it didn't help. I mean, the paper was accepted, but she didn't rush.
Okay.
So probably I wasn't the only one.
I also think it's important to recognize that the editors and associate editors do try to be objective, but at the same time, we're all human. And whenever I'm responding, if I have a paper under review in a journal and they come and ask me to review a manuscript for them, I will do it. Even though I may not want to, only because I think, if honestly, if you are always rejecting their request to review, they're going to be less inclined to give you a break on your manuscript, on your own submission.
And that's the humanness, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's being honest.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay.
There's also a reverse element to it. So sometimes we obviously do reject, and then the author's response is an interesting one. Okay, I have a lot of authors who respond very positively and say thank you for the process because whatever, and that's really nice and kind.
Yeah.
Occasionally we have authors who write in and basically argue that was all crap, guys, because you've rejected me and my ideas are fantastic. It's not helpful.
You would be shocked if you knew how many people have written nasty emails and replies to editors-in-chief and associate editors. I've received them. I'm sure you've received them. I'm shocked that you could be so stupid as to do something like that.
Actually, I would suggest that you go ahead and write it, just don't hit send. Yes, don't hit send.
Just relief.
That's right. Yeah, it feels better.
Because we are human, right?
Right.
And even if it's a reject, it's review processes. One more question up the back. Yes.
Thank you for organising this interesting session. I'm Greg Bamber from Monash University in Australia, and my question is about journal rankings, which are increasingly of interest to deans of business schools and so on, who seem increasingly obsessed with the rankings of journals rather than the content or the substance of what we're researching. Is it a so-called top-tier journal? And my question, I guess, is particularly inviting the editors on the panel, but also others to reflect on this question, how they are influenced by journal rankings, how they try and shape them, how this is affecting the practice of publishing that we are all engaged in the journals, how it affects the future of the journals. And I guess I'm particularly prompted to ask the question because a journal that I know, a fine journal in Australia that has been going for several decades, was ranked by the Australian Business Deans Council as a B-level journal, which is kind of the third tier down, and the editor subsequently told me this was the kiss of death, and it's actually killed the journal because many business school deans say to staff, don't send your stuff to a low-ranked journal. So this editor said the flow of good material dried up almost overnight after it was ranked B by a system which is not transparent. It's not an accountable kind of ranking system. So any reflections on this journal rankings fetish that we all are within this context now?
I would say it's like the weather in Iceland. It's a reality. You can't do much about it. And you better try to adjust what you cannot do much about. So that's what we all do. I'm not a university dean or anything like that, so I'm just a journal editor, and that means that we have to go for this. It's a mad race, and it never ends, but we still have to be in it. That's the only choice. And I'm particularly affected by that because I'm the editor of a new journal. A new guy could be a potential threat to other publishers. It could be a potential threat to other journals. So how do we stop this guy before he becomes a threat? We make it difficult for him to get, or her, to get good manuscripts. So you cannot get good manuscripts because you don't have any ranking. And you cannot get a good ranking because you're a new journal. So it's catch-22. But you still have to survive this. We are 5 years now old, Journal of Global Management.
Mobility.
And we have got ABDC B level. We have got straight into CABS, called the ABS, the second level. And we are now expecting, I'm quite confident, to get SSCI just in a few weeks. So then we have a ticket to ride. Then nobody can kick us out of the game anymore. We are there to take whatever there is. But we're still in the mad race, unfortunately.
Well said, Jan. Well said.
Absolutely, and I believe actually, Jan, what you've done, you and Yvonne, I guess, at Journal of Global Mobility is fantastic work, and others who have been supporters, because it is very hard to launch a journal and get it up to these sorts of ranking that it becomes more attractive to publish it. Because at the end of the day, that is, as you say, Greg, that is what especially young academics have to strive for. Okay, a particular level of quality. Now, for my journal, we also strive for the highest level of quality that we can get. We have doubled our impact factor in the last sort of 5 years or so. But the point is, we're a very particularly broad church, okay, in terms of how you can write articles, what sort of topics, and therefore it sometimes goes beyond the quality element to an ethical question about actually here is somebody, and I hope I don't step on anybody's toes here, who publishes about trade unionism in Madagascar or something like that, which we will consider and we will publish if it is good quality, right? Will it really improve our impact factor? Well, it depends on the discourse and how often it will be cited, but you know in certain topics that that's less likely than in others. So then it becomes not a quality, but an ethical question almost, or at least both. Okay.
Margaret, any further comments that you'd like to add?
No, it is a game, and the rankings are there, and I agree with Jan that we're not going to change it.
Got to be in it. Yeah, learn the rules of the game is what Jan has always said to me. Yeah, learn the rules of the game and learn how to play them, and they're not as tricky as you think. Right. I'm going to ask. The next topic is handling difficult reviews. I think we've already covered that, but the question is anger or acceptance. Your one-word answer: anger or acceptance.
You start with anger and then
Yeah.
just state it.
Yeah, I'm straight at acceptance. What about you, Margaret?
I'm straight at anger, and then I move into acceptance.
Yeah, where are you get the revisions?
Just yesterday, or a few days ago, we got the rejection. So I can tell you fresh from the dog's mouth what it is.
Yeah.
So we just look at the comments, because you still get comments. Luckily, you don't just get one line, you are rejected. So you get all the comments from the reviewer motivating the reason why you get rejected. So we divide into two categories. One is sort of say opinionated attitude of the reviewers. So we put that aside. And then we look for things that can really improve the quality. Also, it convinces us that we can improve the quality of the manuscript before we submit it somewhere else. But the trick is, don't do too much, because it's going to be another set of reviewers looking at it. So what we really is convincing ourselves that this is going to improve it. We do that and then send it somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Jan, for your one-word answer. Michael, Vesa.
If I longer than 1 hour.
That's
as
okay.
well,
Go for it. Go for it.
Because at least what I have been looking and I've been a little worried is about this younger generation who faces these pressures immediately.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of, we are discussing also there, it's not only about the author, but it's also the context where the author comes from. Some just luckily have better starting points. If you are working in the institution where like all the colleagues are publishing there in the top, or then in some other level. So it's very different. And at the same time, this is sort of global expectation to be at higher and higher level.
Sure.
And I can see and I've heard like these kind of stories where people are really harshly disappointed and almost throw their whole career. And then their first submission was the academic management journal or something like that. And it's sort of, they are not guided through on the selection, and you need time to train and prepare. Less you have support, more you have to do on your own, of course, and get the good networks and so on. But starting points, and that way, how to make the game still such that it's available for everyone.
Yes, understood. When you get your difficult reviews, anger or acceptance?
Well, I think some anger, but at the same time I try to sort of look it from the angle that, is this the right forum? Because I know typically that, I know that there is something, like someone else also said, there is something, but maybe this is not the right forum, it's not in that kind of area that should be published. So I try to just quite calmly to look at the other alternatives.
Okay, Michael, what's your reaction?
Pretty similar. I mean, actually anger, probably not, disappointment, frustration sometimes. But then it's more like Jan describes. If it is a rejection, okay, so at some stage is, okay, so where do we go next? And what's useful from this review to be tackled? And what we feel we can't address or for whatever reason. So it becomes more pragmatic over time. Of course, at first you have a bit of emotions.
Yes, I'm always in acceptance and excited. I'm with Margaret, and I pretty much stay there for the whole revision. I do, and I think that's because I have Phyllis Faraday as one of my supervisors, who's really tough. And so if you can survive Phyllis for a PhD, reviewers are a walk in the park. So, all right, dealing with rejection, give up or go forward. I think we've got an answer to that. It's pretty much go forward. Don't give up. Don't give up.
There's an excellent paper by Nancy Day, published in 2011 in AMLE, Academy of Management Learning and Education, just about how to cope with rejection. I recommend everybody to read it. Excellent paper.
Yes.
I wish I could write such a paper.
She's actually got a whole list of tips, and one of her best ones is what you've said, Margaret, which is read it, put it away, and don't come back to it for a week or two, and just forget it. And just go sleep on it, never send the email. There are all these really practical tips, because you're human. Yeah. Thank you. Margaret, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think it is important when you get a rejection to not just immediately send that manuscript to another journal without making any changes on it. I know as a reviewer, I have gotten the same manuscript that I rejected for one journal, and then within the next week, I get a request to review it for another journal. And they obviously have not made any changes on it, which annoys me to no end. So of course I'm going to reject that again, probably, because I already rejected it for one journal. So for my own, I will do like what Jan was suggesting, go through the comments of the reviewers and make changes based on their feedback. For those comments that are of substance, that will help improve the quality of your work.
That's a kiss of death, don't you think? If you do that, I will actually write to the editor of the journal and say, I reviewed this last week for such and such.
Yeah, I've done that too.
And which really, then the editor is aware of it. I'm not just sending it back saying reject. I really find,
Now, if it's a desk reject, you could probably go ahead and send it somewhere else. Because usually the desk reject is because it's not a good fit. If it's rejected because it's just not good quality, then you do want to work on revising it.
Sure.
I get this once a month, roughly. A letter from some reviewer saying, I've done exactly this before. Maybe last week, maybe 4 months ago. It doesn't matter, but that obviously doesn't inspire confidence for me into the writer.
Yes, and I actually write, not much has changed since I was asked to review it 4 months ago, which doesn't bode well either. Okay, so let's move on to our last topic, which is insider tips for building a publishing profile. So this is not necessarily about how to get published, right? Because we've sort of covered that, and I think most people are aware of, the tips of how to get published. But there's a publishing profile that sits alongside the publishing work that you do. You all have a profile based on, I could name that profile for each of you based on through my lens. But how do you build that? What are your tips for doing that?
I think you have to find a topic that you really like. I think really intrinsic motivation for me, like my field is crossover, and I can just start now, talk about 5 hours about it and still be excited. So I think if you like what you're doing, because sometimes you do the work that your supervisor asks you to do or ordered you to do, all kind of thing. I met a person, she was associate professor, and she told me about her department that it's I don't want to mention the country, but there is a system there that the head of the department, he tells all the group what to do work on. And she was very interested in one topic, but she had to do what he asked her to do, and she hated it. She spoke to me, she had tears in her eyes. I mean, I don't think I haven't read a lot, so I don't know if she even continued. So I think if you're lucky and you love the topic that you're working on, that's going to make you do more work and do more work and do more work. So if we speak about personal experiences, so I started this crossover issue with Lou, which I don't know if you're familiar with, meaning that experiences that one person experience or feels, the mood, the emotions, cross over to another person. It might be the spouse, and then I started with couples. I started with couples. And then I went and said, okay, and it was only negative crossover, strain, stress, burnout, etc. That was. And then I said, well, it can be also positive, so I thought, wow, positive crossover. And then I said, what happens between couples, which, because of the frequent interaction and because they know each other, it can be also among team members. So I took step by step, and everybody who does the research on family knows my work. So, and then what's very important, once you are ready, to write at least 1 or 2 theoretical papers, and this really puts you on the map and get a lot of citations. What I also did, I tried, so this was one thing, but I had other interests, and I somehow managed to combine. I did some studies about business travelers, and then I did some studies about recovery, and I combined, and I said that actually business travel can be a kind of respite, because even though a person is traveling a lot and he has a lot of meetings, etc., the fact that he is away from the physical world, it's like a kind of recovery. So I have 3 topics. I can see some angles that are the same, and I think that's what made some of my work very famous
and memorable. And it is for exactly that. And you've done exactly that to build your profile in those areas. So my big takeaway from what you've said is be passionate, have a genuine interest.
And find an interesting niche.
And a niche, so not a crowded space. Find something that maybe only has a few others that are in it, and go there. And actually, we've seen a few of those papers here in the expat management track. hostile environments and things like that, where there's an opportunity to fill a gap. Vesa, what would be your tips for building a publishing profile?
I think that one of the issues that we haven't pointed out yet is that I think what is common to all of us, we have been writing quite much. I think that's one way of learning and developing and finding your way. So I think in the early careers, when I came from the environment where it's quite a while ago, and the professors had retired already quite a while ago, where like there was no tradition to publish internationally anything. It was like I wisely selected the topic that no one was doing anything with, and all those hurdles to get started. But luckily that led to a situation that then I realized myself, okay, I have to go out. And that's why when I decided to do the article PhD, which is pretty common now, but it was I was in our department the first one.
So you mean PhD by publication?
Publications,
right.
And then you start getting feedback. And the other issue that I did early days was that I started to take a little bit look around. I was in the UK, USA, Canada, a little bit short-term trips to see that, okay, how the world operates outside.
Right.
And try to learn from those experiences.
Okay.
And then I think my personal style, or how it sort of gradually emerges, that I realized what I like. That's so simple. I think that life gets really hard if you have to do 30, 40 years almost like something that you are not really liking about. So I find my niche between there. I'm not like a model builder, theoretician kind of, but I like to be close to practice and I like to observe what is going on.
Right.
And from that angle, quite often I get my observation that there is something going on that literature doesn't discuss.
Okay.
And then it's like the self-initiated expatriation paper, first one in 2000, and all the global career papers then in later on, where like a lot of expectations. Research was done on the multinational companies to expatriates, and
yes.
At the same time most mobility happens outside that box.
Yes.
And then we sort of started to see gradually, and now we can, for example, see this short-term assignment and other stuff which is getting much higher up.
Yes.
So there are developments all the time. Similarly, the tradition was always to discuss about these assignments as once in a lifetime experience.
Yes.
So you go there and then you go back. Then I look again about Finnish expatriates. 40 to 50% are 3 to 4 assignments behind and so on. So then you build from that one, rather from the practice than
yes.
from the theory. So it's my personal approach.
So you're doing a very similar thing to what Mina's suggesting, which is stick with what you like, stick with what interests you and what you're passionate about. But your first comment was if you want to build a publishing pipeline, then you need to be writing, and you need to write. Right, and I think that's true. You need to actually be writing, and writing is a skill that you acquire, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't think any of us are born with it. We have to work at it. Yeah. Jan, tips for building a publishing profile.
Yeah. Dig where you stand. Maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about, but I've been an expatriate academic myself for more than 2 decades. And that's how I became interested in expatriates. So I started to do research about expatriates. I've done, actually my dissertation long time ago was about mathematical programming. Would you believe? What I am today is something quite different. Well, anyway, that I got the influence. If I think it's something there, if I think it makes sense to me, maybe somebody else also think it makes sense. So who is also in expatriate or do research about expatriate. So that's how I find my interesting topics. I like to do topics which with a practical relevance. I don't like just to find out some variables, whatever, that have some kind of relationship. I want to look at the practical relevance for expatriates and see if that could be helpful from a practical point of view. I cannot claim that all my research is like that, but most of it, because that's how I start. I dig where I stand.
Okay, dig where you stand. Okay. All right. Margaret, you're digging a hole for yourself.
Yeah, probably. But you can still see me, right?
Before we hear from you, Margaret, Mina would
No, I
like to
think,
add.
again, from my experience, it's very good certain points to work with the co-author or with a team, because not only it makes work sometimes easier, but you learn so much from people, especially if they are not from your faculty or they come from different universities, they had different mentors, and I think this really contributes a lot to what you're going to do. My experience.
Absolutely agree with that. Margaret?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what everyone has said, is to be passionate about the research that you're doing. But I think it's also important to recognize that the area of research that you're working on is evolving, and to stay alert to the evolutionary process that is going on, especially in terms of expanding the scope of the studies, looking at different research questions and the like, so you can stay relevant. So you're not repeatedly researching on the same topic, but you're growing with your research, and I think that helps. Definitely having good collaborators is a blessing. I think all of us have worked with people that we swear we'll never work with again. Don't be one of those people. Be a good collaborator when you're working on a team. And even if you're going to be the fifth author on a paper, still do your fair share and contribute to that work, because it is important, and it says something about who you are in terms of that contribution. And also, I guess the other thing I wanted to say is, don't be a perfectionist. I have one of my PhD students, she graduated about 3 years ago. She's super bright and a hard worker, but she wants everything to be perfect before she sends anything out to a journal. And it's never going to be perfect. I don't care how good you are, it won't be perfect. So get it out the door. Don't wait and keep trying to make it perfect.
Great tips. Michael?
I have to admit, the first time when you sent this and the F word for famous came up, I felt a bit scared and thinking, you can't mean me, that sort of idea. So it is, I agree with almost everything that has been said before, and it's a personal connection, it's a passion for thing. For me, I did a PhD and I had two main topics, and then by chance I ran a center on international mobility, and then so that became my third. And what I did at the beginning was, because I took it over, it wasn't really mine, and I went to EGOS and EURAM, and they were fantastic outlets to get an overview of what was actually being discussed, what people were interested in. And I simply sat there, listened to it, explored what I would like to do, with the background of this, and of course good collaborators and all that helped. So that was my orientation, I guess, at the beginning of this particular area of research. And the other one was simply, I always was somebody to become, we all work in management, and so I wanted to connect not just to academia, but also to management. And so I've always tried, when you talk about that publication identity or whatever, to cover both elements. And it helps because they actually, at least for me, I 2 weeks ago I launched a report in London with, I don't know, 60 practitioners. They come up to me and chat about stuff, right? And that can help me create an idea of, this is what they're tackling with. That might be quite interesting. You do this as well.
Yes,
right?
I do.
And so when we chat here, it's academics, and we try to cross-fertilize. Right? And that's brilliant. And so it's an evolving thing, but I don't have a master plan. It just simply means, this is interesting, let's do this. So.
Yes. Okay. Questions from the audience about building a profile? Yes.
If I just wanted to take one step back. I find conferences like this an amazing opportunity to get papers looked at, reviewed, and then move forward with that paper. But I'm now told there's a bit of a trend where that's viewed as double dipping. What are the comments from the panel?
Double dipping in the sense of?
The percentage of the manuscript, there's a certain percentage allowed from the manuscript that has been reviewed in the conference to be then moved forward into the journal.
Okay. And but there's a context lens here, isn't there? Because some countries wouldn't see that as double dipping, but I think other countries might. Would I be correct in?
Well, I just want a clarification on this.
Okay.
AMJ or AOM had this issue that was raised with their the Academy of Management that were in the proceedings. So if it was published in the proceedings, then could it then be published in a journal? And when that issue came up, they changed how the proceeding papers were formatted, and they cut those tremendously, so it wasn't the same paper.
It's reduced down to 6 pages
Yeah,
now, so you can only, the proceedings paper is only 6 pages, not a full manuscript.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they got around that. But if your paper is published in a proceedings or some kind of conference proceedings, the full manuscript is, then it's more difficult probably to get that into a journal. But if it's just a conference presentation that doesn't appear in a proceedings, then there's no problem, as far as I'm concerned, to send it to a journal.
But there are some conferences too that will actually ask the question that this will go in the proceedings, tick the box if you do not wish your full paper to be in the proceedings, so that if that is an issue for your particular country or university, you have an opt-out so that you don't jeopardize the journal publication over the lesser quality or less ranked conference proceeding. So that's an option too that I have seen at some Australian conferences, because Australia can be quite strict. I'm Australian and I did my PhD at Monash, and they can be very strict about conference papers becoming chapters, and them all being the same. There's a threshold of change that you have to engage in for each one. Thank you. Do we have another question? Yes?
About years, all of you have been working in teams, and I've done a quick analysis of their teams, and the sort of saying the liveling and to a certain extent McNulty, you work a lot together. I can see that Suutari, McNulty, Selmer, Dickmann and Rooster, you got your teams. What do you suggest? Should we find our own group and work a lot with them, or should we try to have many different groups? How do we look there? I mean, I also see that you are alone. You don't sort of have your team. Sorry, Shaffer.
No, Margaret has a team.
I've actually never published anything alone.
No, you have your things that you publish often with.
Yes.
The same group.
Yes.
You change your groups.
Oh yes, I work with multiple groups. Yes.
What should we do? Should we try to get many different groups, or should we sort of find our own people?
That's a great question.
What I've found now is that the bar has been raised for publications, and usually one person doesn't have the skills needed to get into, to write or produce a publication for a top journal. So I think the idea there is to assemble a team who has the skills that you need. So you need somebody good with theory, you need a good statistician if it's a quantitative paper, and approach it from that standpoint. But it's also good to work with people that you're comfortable working with, but you want to have complementary skills also that each can bring to the project.
Yeah. And if I may add, there's a trust level. So if you keep on working in one team several times, or for several articles, that's good. I'm not saying you should only work in one team. You can work in several, that's also fine, different interests and so on. But there is something about being comfortable with each other and trusting each other. Yeah, that's helpful.
And also a lot of my publications are with PhD students, and so by just virtue of that, I'm going to have different people involved.
Yes. Vesa, you're very popular amongst the select
He's a popular guy.
Well, but I still think that the basic starting point, at least in my case, is pretty much that this is really personal relationship. So I work with colleagues that I feel comfortable with,
Yes.
not even on a personal level, but also with the style. We were talking about the profile.
Yes.
Of course, it's so much easier if you have a group of people who have sort of similar idea of what research means, what are the aims of research, and then typically you sort of, then of course the PhD groups, it's sort of that you grow gradually to learn it's a different story.
Yes.
Then you typically do your much more diverse stuff in that group and
Yes.
within the colleagues.
Yes.
I think it's really important to find that kind of colleagues that have a similar idea, because otherwise it can be really difficult to cooperate.
Well, I would say on that, and you've alluded to this, that when you find them and you work really well with them, it's like gold. And you don't want to let it go and you don't want to ruin it, because it doesn't always happen. There are some partnerships that are just magic and they just kind of happen. Jan, you've had probably the longest standing co-authoring team-based.
Yeah, I've been working with a former colleague from Aarhus University. I'm still associated with Aarhus University. And we probably produce something between 40 and 50 papers together. And obviously I'm a little bit more conservative than many of my colleagues here. I find some gold and I keep to it.
Yeah,
I don't want to let go of gold. So, and I'm not sure I can find gold anywhere else. So I just keep it in my pocket.
I'm not sure that there's a right or a wrong answer about changing teams and moving on, but I think, as you know, like we have so much other stuff that we do in our day as academics. So when you find people that you write well with, that understand how you think, that you know each other's strengths and weaknesses, it's sort of a whole bunch of effort that you don't have to get into again for each next project. I've worked in a number of teams. I'm working in two fabulous teams right now with completely different people. And there's 4 in each one, and I was always scared to co-author in a team of more than 3. I thought when you start getting to 4, doesn't that get a bit unmanageable? It does. But it can, but no, both teams are awesome, and I hope they go for a long time. Folks, that's the end of our session. It's been an hour and a half. I hope the audience has enjoyed the honesty and frankness